No one ever taught us the difference between personality and identity, and confusing the two is why so many people stay stuck. When I heard this, everything clicked, especially when I looked at it through astrology. This video explains it better than I ever could.
I need to talk to you guys about something that I know keeps people stuck perpetually in suffering, and I don't think you've ever heard it this way. And once you understand the difference, you're not going to be able to unknow the difference. But proceed with caution, because once you know the shit, you can't unknow it. My name is Trish Law. I'm a trauma-informed life coach. That's not really what I do. I help people stop living their lives by the version of themselves they play on TV and start actually living the life that's meant for them. A job description I'm fairly certain I was burned for many other lifetimes ago. Anyway, moving along. Has anybody ever told you about the difference between a personality and an identity? Because this is good shit. They're different. They're not the same thing. I'm going to explain it my way so you understand it, because I do think the framework matters here. A personality is something you develop as you're kind of navigating the planet, your trauma, the two 6-year-olds in grown-up suits that you call your parents. And basically, it's a collection of trauma responses. Like your sense of humor, yeah, you didn't pick that up out of nowhere. Your OCD, these things that we call disorders, your perfectionism, your people pleasing, these things that you picked up along the way, these little quirks. Some of them are features, some of them are bugs, sometimes they're both. Yeah, that's your personality. And it's this thing that you became because you needed it. You needed to have some sense of that. It's a way that you place yourself in the world. Like this is you know how Trish is. She can't be on time to save her life. It's kind of got an essence to it. It's a flavor. It's like an essence of a flavor, right? It's like the essence of when you show up in the room, how people would describe you, right? Oh, that person's really funny. She's really smart. That person has got her shit together. You know what I'm saying? Like my personality pays my bills. It's probably one of the greatest gifts I have. I actually, one of the things I like the most about myself is my personality. But this bitch was not a cheap thing to build. I didn't get this witty because I just was born this way. I was this witty and this sharp-tongued because I needed to be. You can't have a sensitive soul like mine and not be kind of a cunt sometimes. But I digress. We all have a personality. It's one of the greatest gifts that we receive. It's kind of the thing that gets 3D printed for the first half of your life. Now, my favorite definition of authenticity is from Gary Zukav, and he calls the definition of authentic power when your personality comes to serve your soul. In other words, when you start healing, you complete the karmic cycle of the development of your personality. And now, when you start to really figure out why you're here on this planet, your personality is supposed to serve the higher self.
This is where astrology gets really interesting. In astrology, personality lives in your rising sign and your sun, how you naturally show up, and the flavor that people feel when you walk into a room. Plus your moon, Mercury, Mars, and Saturn, which are your emotional and nervous system patterns. It's the whole system that you developed to move through life. It's the same chart energy for the majority, almost your whole life, but it can run in survival mode or in a healed, conscious way. For me, humor became protection. I was the funny kid growing up. Quick one-liners, goofing off to get out of uncomfortable situations, especially around men that made me feel unsafe. Even now, when trolls come at me, I joke instead of fighting. That's my Mercury and my Mars. Quick mind and quick reactions, turning stress into humor instead of fear. And my people pleasing. That started at home. If I thought I did something wrong, I would clean the whole entire house just to try and make it right. I learned early that love came from being useful, being good, and being easy. And then I did it in my friendships, changing how I dressed, talked, and who I was, just to keep people around. That's Moon and Saturn energy in survival mode. Emotional safety tied to performance. And I became hyper independent and controlling because my system learned that if I'm not in charge, I'm not safe. That is heavy Capricorn and Saturn wiring. Strength built from necessity, not comfort.
This is where identity comes in. Now I'm gonna lose some of you right here because this is some high-level will hunting shit. So that might mean you have to watch this a few times, especially those of you in the mental health world. This is a little above your pay grade, but stick with me. No offense. None taken, Trish. Identities are the building blocks of the personality. In other words, our identity is not a fixed state. Personality is something we develop. Identity is like little steps that we go through over the course of our life. Identities are not permanent. Personality is.
In astrology, identity is your sun, your north node, and major life transits like Saturn and Pluto. When the old version of you doesn't fit anymore, that's a life cycle shift. There are certain life cycles that everyone goes through if they make it to those ages. Your Saturn return happens around the ages of 28 to 30. It's the grow up for real phase. Commitments get serious. You're building your adult life structure. My Saturn return started in 2010, and when I finally set boundaries in a job that didn't feel safe and stepped into real adulthood. Then in 2011 became all about building a future, planning a wedding, going public on a TV show, committing to a life structure. I got married right on my exact Saturn return. And in 2012, I was in college rebuilding my life as an adult. And then later in life, usually late 30s to early 40s, there's Pluto square Pluto. It's a deep transformation cycle. It doesn't just change your circumstances, it changes who you are. I went through my Pluto square Pluto and it showed up as a car accident that changed my nervous system, a huge life move where I lost everything familiar, intense relationships breaking apart, and when it was over, I'm not the same person anymore. And that wasn't me falling apart, that was my life upgrading. And astrology shows there are multiple cycles like this across a lifetime, not just these two.
So when somebody's allegedly healing, but they are like a totally different version of themselves, they're totally like different personality, that's not actually somebody who's healed. That's somebody who's performing. That is a Oscar-winning performance. Okay, we know these people. They use all the language. They're like, they don't speak the same way. They don't have the same mannerisms. Everything's curated. That's not somebody who has healed. That's somebody who's given themselves a personality transplant that appears to be healed. Not the same thing. Identity is something that we are supposed to evolve and outgrow. And truthfully, because we don't know the distinction of these two things, this distinction is what causes people to suffer. Because when somebody's identity is going through an evolution, or there's a part of them that's going to have to die for them to fit through the door of where they're going next, we call it a midlife crisis or a mentee B. It is neither. It is an identity collapse, and it's normal and healthy, and it's supposed to happen. It is incredibly disorienting, and the suffering is a result of holding on to a version of ourselves that we are actually meant to outgrow. I don't believe it's actually a mental health issue. I think it's like the spiritual analogy of when you've outgrown a pair of shoes, but you keep wearing them, even though the soles are worn out and they hurt and they give you blisters and they look and feel like shit. Identities are not quirks. They're seemingly constitutions. This happens a lot in codependency, where we're assigned a role in a family or in a culture that actually doesn't fit the real blueprint of who we are. But we play with it for a little while until something inside of us starts to get sick of our shit and said, we're done playing this character. Time to evolve. Time to transition. Time to grow. Time to heal from the self-abandonment it required for you to keep playing this role as you did. And listen, healing and growth are the same thing, and you know that they're the same thing because they both feel like shit. I've never seen an identity collapse without a ton of discomfort. Very much in the same way, I've never seen a woman give birth without tons of discomfort. Welcome to planet Earth, bitches. Identity is who we think we are because we're not paying attention, who we've been told we are by people who don't know themselves, and who we've been trained to believe we are by society. I also think people that are caught in identities that they're meant to outgrow is probably the main source of depression, which I look at as repression. It's like being a hermit crab that's stuck in a shell too long. You're gonna get really uncomfortable if you stay there. You can have your identity collapse and maintain your personality. Your essence remains the same, but what finances your choices totally changes.
This is where astrology and self work came together for me. I didn't always understand astrology like this. I started with horoscopes and random chart posts, and honestly, they never made any sense. It wasn't until I started actually studying astrology, tracking my life experiences, and doing self work alongside with that, and everything just clicked. Then I joined a learning community and started seeing how astrology connects to real life patterns instead of just traits. But what really made it stick was learning it somatically, mapping the chart onto the body and the nervous system, feeling where stress and emotions live instead of just reading placements. That is when astrology stopped being abstract and it became practical for me. I've only been learning astrology deeply for about 4 years, but every major transit I've learned about, I could look back and connect the dots to what I had lived through. I stopped asking what was wrong with me and started asking, what cycles am I in and what is it teaching me? I realized that a lot of what I'd been labeled with were descriptions of my nervous system under stress, not who I actually was. And that doesn't mean that medicine doesn't have a place, but understanding myself changed everything. In astrology, healing doesn't change your chart, it changes what parts of your chart is driving you. Your personality stops being protection and becomes a tool. I still have the same blunt humor and the same intensity. Now it's just used to tell the truth, teach, and not defend. Through the learning community that I'm a part of, I was introduced to a new and up and coming astrology app. It's called the Solar Map app, which somatically makes this so much easier because it visually shows your chart, your transits, and how they move through your life and your body. And this is why this question matters so much.
So the next time you're really uncomfortable, instead of asking, oh my God, what label do I need? Instead, ask yourself this question: what part of me is trying to die so that a new part of me can be reborn?
So, comment map if you want to learn how to integrate your two healing journeys.